The silence in my own home had become a suffocating blanket, a tangible presence that pressed down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. My phone, my lifeline to the outside world, my small window of autonomy, was gone. Vanished. I'd searched everywhere, the familiar ritual of padding pockets, upending cushions, peering under furniture, but the cold dread solidifying in my gut told me this was no ordinary misplacement. Mark and Chloe, my darling children, had been here earlier, their visit cloyingly solicitous, full of questions about my health, my finances, my plans for the future. Their eyes, usually so quick to glaze over when I spoke of anything other than their own lives, had been unnervingly focused, sharp with an intensity that now, in retrospect, screamed premeditation. They'd offered to make tea, a rare occurrence, and Chloe had bustled about the kitchen while Mark engaged me in an overly earnest conversation about the benefits of downsizing and simplified living. It was then, I realized, amidst the clatter of cups and the drone of Mark's carefully rehearsed arguments, that my phone must have disappeared from the hall table where I always left it. The realization hit me not as a sudden shock, but as the final, undeniable piece of a grim puzzle I hadn't consciously been assembling. Their recent visits, the subtle shifts in their conversation, the way they exchanged knowing glances when they thought I wasn't looking, it all coalesced into a sickening certainty. They had taken my phone. They had deliberately, callously, severed my connection to anyone who might offer support, advice, or a dissenting opinion to whatever scheme they were concocting. The betrayal was a physical ache, a burning tightness in my chest that mimicked a heart attack, though this pain was purely emotional. A grief for the children I thought I knew, the children I had raised to be better than this. What did they want? To isolate me. To bully me into signing something, agreeing to something that would strip me of my independence, my home, my dignity. The sheer audacity of it, the cruel calculation, left me breathless. My own flesh and blood, treating me like a senile inconvenience, a problem to be managed, a resource to be controlled. The anger began to simmer then, a low, dangerous heat beneath the ice of my initial shock. They thought they had me trapped, a voiceless, helpless old woman at their mercy. They thought that by removing my phone, they had removed my power. Little did they know, their desperate, clumsy attempt at control was pitifully, laughably, too late. My foresight, born of a lifetime of observing human nature, even within my own family, had already set a different kind of plan in motion, a plan they couldn't even begin to imagine. Their smug confidence, their belief in their own cleverness, would be their undoing. The silence they had tried to impose on me would soon be shattered by a truth they were utterly unprepared to hear. Their performance over the next few days was a masterclass in manipulative condescension. Chloe would pop in with groceries I hadn't asked for, her smile too bright, her concern too forced, asking if I'd found that silly old phone yet, tutting sympathetically when I said no. Mark would call the landline my landline, which they apparently didn't consider a threat, or perhaps they simply assumed I wouldn't know who to call, or wouldn't have the nerve, his voice dripping with false solicitude, checking if I needed anything, gently reminding me how vulnerable I was living alone, especially now, incommunicado. They never mentioned the phone directly as something they had taken. Oh no, that would be too crude. Instead, it was always that lost phone, your misplaced phone, the implication being that my age was addling my memory, making me careless, irresponsible. They brought brochures for assisted living communities, glossy pamphlets filled with smiling seniors engaged in forced-looking activities, their own faces alight with an almost ghoulish enthusiasm, as they pointed out the benefits: round-the-clock care I didn't need, communal dining I didn't want, a tiny apartment that felt more like a beautifully appointed prison cell. They spoke of selling my house, my home, the repository of a lifetime of memories, as if it were a foregone conclusion, a mere administrative detail in their grand plan for my welfare. It's just too much for you now, Mom, Mark would say, patting my hand with a patronizing air that made my skin crawl. We just want you to be safe and comfortable, without all this worry, their worry, I noted with a cynical internal twist, seemed to revolve entirely around how quickly they could liquidate my assets and secure their inheritance, or perhaps alleviate themselves of the perceived burden of my independent existence. I played along, the picture of bewildered compliance. I nodded vaguely, sighed about my failing memory, allowed them to help me with tasks I was perfectly capable of performing myself. Each act of feigned helplessness was a small, sharp stone I tucked away, building a cairn of their deceit. Their arrogance was breathtaking. They moved through my house with an air of proprietorship, discussing changes they would make once things are settled, their voices low, but not quite low enough, confident in their belief that I was deaf to their machinations, blind to their greed. The irony was a bitter pill, yet it fueled my resolve. They saw a frail, confused old woman, easily manipulated. They failed to see the mind behind the aging facade, a mind that was sharper, more strategic, and far more prepared than they could ever comprehend. My internal monologue during those days was a fierce, silent rebuttal to their every word, every action. I catalogued their lies, their condescension, their thinly veiled avarice. And I waited. The silence of my missing phone was a constant reminder of their betrayal, but it was also, in a strange way, a source of dark amusement. They thought it was their trump card, their key to controlling me. They had no idea it was merely a prop in a much larger play, a drama whose final act I had already scripted, with the invaluable assistance of someone far more astute and legally empowered than my grasping, short-sighted children. Their carefully constructed cage was missing a crucial element, bars strong enough to hold a woman who had already unlocked the door from the outside. The memory of Ms. Albright's office was a calm, clear island in the turbulent sea of my current predicament. It had been 3 weeks before the phone incident, a proactive measure taken not out of specific fear, but out of a growing unease, a subtle shift in Mark and Chloe's attitudes that had set my internal alarm bells ringing. They had started making comments about my forgetfulness, questioning my ability to manage my affairs, offering to help with my banking in a way that felt less like assistance, and more like an attempt to gain access. I wasn't born yesterday. I'd seen enough cautionary tales among my friends, tales of loving children suddenly turning predatory when faced with the prospect of an inheritance, or the inconvenience of an aging parent. So, I had made an appointment. Ms. Albright was a woman whose reputation for sharp intellect and unwavering client loyalty preceded her. Her office was understated, elegant, exuding an air of quiet competence. She listened patiently as I outlined my concerns, my desire to protect my assets, my autonomy, and my right to live out my days on my own terms. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a focused attention that made me feel understood, validated. "It's wise to be prepared, Eleanor," she'd said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Too often, people wait until it's too late, until they are already vulnerable and pressured." We spent 2 hours discussing my estate, my will, and crucially, establishing a durable power of attorney for financial and healthcare matters, appointing Ms. Albright herself as my primary agent, with very specific, unalterable instructions, should I ever be deemed incapacitated or be subjected to undue influence. We also drafted a new will, one that significantly restructured the distribution of my assets, favoring a charitable foundation I'd long admired and providing only token amounts to Mark and Chloe, contingent upon their demonstrable respect and care for me in my final years. A clause Ms. Albright had termed the good behavior incentive. All documents were signed, notarized, and securely filed, with copies placed in a safe deposit box to which only Ms. Albright and I had access. She had also given me her private cell number, memorized and then deleted from my phone's contacts, for use in precisely such a situation as I now found myself. "If they ever try to isolate you, Eleanor," she'd advised, "if they take your phone, if they try to coerce you into signing anything against your will, do nothing. Say nothing to incriminate yourself or reveal your hand." Let them think they are succeeding. The moment they present you with a document, the moment they believe they have you cornered, that is when we act. Until then, observe, gather evidence in your mind, and know that your preparations have already checkmated them. Her words, now recalled with crystal clarity, were a lifeline. The quiet satisfaction of that meeting, the feeling of having taken control of my own destiny, was a potent antidote to the helplessness my children were so keen to impose. My missing phone was an irrelevance. The real calls, the important ones, had already been made. The legal fortress I had constructed around myself was invisible to Mark and Chloe, but it was impenetrable. They were marching confidently towards a brick wall, blissfully unaware of its existence, while I, their supposed captive, held the architectural plans. The thought brought a grim, steely resolve to my heart. Let them play their little game. I knew how it would end. The pressure from Mark and Chloe intensified with each passing day, each faint expression of concern, each carefully worded suggestion designed to erode my resistance. They spoke of my house as if it were already sold, discussing potential buyers, the state of the market, how the proceeds would be managed for my benefit. Chloe started bringing over boxes, just to help you sort through things, Mom, get a head start on the packing. The audacity was stunning. They were not just planning my dispossession, they were actively implementing it, right under my nose, while simultaneously lamenting my lost phone and my supposed inability to cope. I watched them, a silent observer in my own life drama, marveling at their capacity for self-deception and their utter underestimation of me. They would present documents, Ms. Albright had warned, and indeed, one afternoon, Mark arrived with a briefcase, a solemn, businesslike air replacing his usual forced joviality. Chloe hovered anxiously in the background, wringing her hands in a display of what I supposed was meant to be sympathetic distress. Mom, Mark began, laying a sheaf of papers on my dining room table, the very table where we had shared countless family meals, celebrations, and heart-to-heart talks in years gone by. The irony was not lost on me. We've had a long talk with the advisors at an excellent facility, Golden Meadows. They have a wonderful apartment available, ground floor, lovely view of the rose garden. And we've also spoken to a very reputable estate agent about the house. He's confident he can get a quick sale at a good price. He slid a pen across the table. These are just some preliminary forms. An application for Golden Meadows, and an agreement to allow Mr. Henderson, the estate agent, to list the property. Just to get the ball rolling, you know. To take the pressure off you, I looked at the papers, a blur of official-looking jargon and signature lines. My heart hammered in my chest, not with fear, but with a rising tide of cold fury and a sense of impending vindication. This was it. The moment Ms. Albright had prepared me for. I feigned confusion, picking up the top sheet, squinting at it. Oh, Mark, this all looks so complicated. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, you know. And without my phone, I can't even call someone to help me read it properly. Chloe rushed forward. Don't worry, Mom, Mark can explain everything. We are here to help. It's all for your own good. Her voice was saccharine, a sweet poison. I let them explain, nodding occasionally, asking a few seemingly muddled questions, playing the part of the bewildered, compliant elder they so clearly believed me to be. So, if I sign this, I asked, pointing a trembling finger, a touch of theatrical flair I rather enjoyed, at a signature line, it means Mr. Henderson can put the house up for sale. Exactly, Mom, Mark said, his relief palpable. And this one means we can secure your lovely new apartment at Golden Meadows. They exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. They thought they had won. They thought their clumsy, cruel little scheme had succeeded. The silence in the room, broken only by their eager, shallow breathing, felt charged, electric. My mind was a whirlwind of emotion, anger at their betrayal, sadness for the love I now knew was conditional, but overriding it all, a steely, exhilarating sense of imminent justice. They had laid their trap, baited it with false concern, and now they waited for their prey to step into it. They had no idea the trap was about to spring shut on them. There were moments, brief and terrifying, when the sheer weight of their betrayal threatened to crush my resolve. Lying in bed at night, in the enforced silence of my phoneless existence, the darkness would press in, filled with their faces, their false smiles, their calculating eyes. How could they? My children, the babies I had nursed, the toddlers whose scraped knees I had kissed better, the teenagers whose angst I had navigated with what I hoped was patience and love. Had it all been a lie? Was their affection always conditional, always secondary to their own self-interest? The thought was a cold stone in my stomach, a grief far deeper than any anger. I remembered Mark as a little boy, his chubby hand clutching mine as we crossed the street, his absolute trust in me a warm, comforting weight. And Chloe, a whirlwind of teenage drama, yet always, I had believed, with a good heart underneath it all. Where had those children gone? When had they been replaced by these grasping, manipulative strangers who saw their mother not as a person to be cherished, but as an obstacle to be removed, a resource to be plundered? These dark thoughts would sometimes lead to a flicker of despair, a whisper of doubt. Was I strong enough to see this through? Was Ms. Albright's plan truly foolproof? What if they found a loophole? What if they managed to override my preparations? But then, the image of Ms. Albright's calm, intelligent face would return, her reassuring words echoing in my memory, "Your preparations have already checkmated them," and the anger would resurface, not hot and impulsive, but cold and purposeful. A shield against the pain. This wasn't just about protecting my assets or my home, it was about protecting my dignity, my right to self-determination. It was about refusing to be erased, to be rendered invisible and powerless by the very people who should have been my staunchest allies. The sadness remained, a dull ache in the background, a lament for the family I thought I had. But it no longer paralyzed me. Instead, it fueled my determination to teach Mark and Chloe a lesson they would never forget. A lesson about respect, about consequences, and about the indomitable spirit of a woman they had so grievously underestimated. Their attempts to isolate me, to make me feel small and helpless, were having the opposite effect. Each condescending remark, each manipulative gesture, only strengthened my resolve, hardened my spine. They thought they were tightening the net, but they were merely driving me further into the fortress of my own carefully laid plans. The locked drawer in my desk, where I kept a spare, old-fashioned, pay-as-you-go mobile phone, a relic they wouldn't even recognize as functional technology, charged and ready for one specific call, felt like a secret weapon, a silent promise of the reckoning to come. Its very existence was a testament to my foresight, a quiet mockery of their supposed cleverness in confiscating my smartphone. They had focused on the obvious, blinded by their arrogance, and missed the subtle, far more dangerous threat. Mark and Chloe grew bolder, their confidence swelling with my apparent passivity. They started speaking more openly in front of me, their discussions about my future taking on an air of settled fact. The movers could probably come in about 3 weeks after the sale closes, Chloe mused one afternoon, flipping through a Home Decor magazine, as if already redecorating my house in her mind. We'll need to sort through all of Mom's old things. So much clutter. I sat in my armchair, pretending to doze, but my ears missed nothing. Clutter. That's what my life's possessions had become to them. Not cherished memories, not pieces of a legacy, but clutter to be disposed of. Mark, meanwhile, was on his laptop, presumably researching investment options for the proceeds. He'd occasionally make comments like, "A diversified portfolio would be best for Mom's situation, low risk, steady income. We need to make sure she's comfortable." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Their concern for my comfort extended only as far as it aligned with their control over my finances. They had even started bringing small, personal items from my bedroom into the living room, just to make it easier when it's time to pack. Mom, my favorite shawl, a framed photograph of my late husband, a small porcelain bird he'd given me, all displaced, handled with a casualness that felt like a violation. Each day was a tightrope walk, maintaining my facade of frail compliance while my internal fury simmered. I focused on Ms. Albright's instructions: observe, endure, wait for the opportune moment. I mentally rehearsed the conversation I would have, the words I would use when the time came to shatter their illusions. The image of their faces, when they finally realized the extent of my preparedness, the depth of their miscalculation, was a grimly satisfying beacon, guiding me through the fog of their deceit. They believed they were in the final stages of a successful campaign, their victory assured. They'd even stopped being quite so meticulous about their feigned sympathy regarding my lost phone. It was as if, in their minds, I was already a non-entity, my opinions irrelevant, my connections severed. They spoke more freely about their own plans, how relieved they would be once I was settled, and they could get on with their lives. The implication was clear. I was the obstacle, the burden. The irony was that their every action, every word, was providing more fuel for Ms. Albright, more evidence of their undue influence, should it ever be needed, though I suspected her initial preemptive strike would be more than sufficient. The empty chair, at my future family gatherings, the one they were so callously trying to create by exiling me to Golden Meadows, would instead be a testament to their own greed and folly. They were so focused on the prize they forgot to check if the game was rigged in my favor, by my own hand. The silent, lost phone on some hidden shelf in their own home was a monument to their short-sightedness, not to my isolation. The day of reckoning arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. Mark and Chloe appeared at my doorstep promptly at 10, their faces a mixture of forced solemnity and barely concealed anticipation. Mark carried the same briefcase, which now seemed to exude an almost palpable aura of their impending triumph. Chloe clutched a small bouquet of supermarket carnations, a pathetic, transparent gesture of affection. "Good morning, Mom," Mark said, a little too brightly. "We have the final paperwork from Golden Meadows, and Mr. Henderson, the estate agent, has an offer on the house already. A very good one, actually." Much quicker than we expected, he spread the documents on the dining room table with a flourish. "If you could just sign here, here, and here, we can get everything finalized today. Then you can relax, and we can start planning your move to that lovely new apartment," Chloe beamed. "Won't it be wonderful, Mom? No more worries about this big old house, or managing on your own." I looked at the papers, then at their eager, predatory faces. The moment had come. The tightrope I had been walking for weeks had reached its end. It was time to step onto solid ground, the ground I had so carefully prepared. My heart was surprisingly calm, a steady beat in the storm of my emotions. I took a slow breath. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through their expectant chatter like a shard of ice. "No, I don't think I'll be signing anything today." They stared at me, stunned into silence. Mark's smile faltered, then vanished. Chloe's eyes widened, the carnations trembling in her hand. "Mom?" Mark said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "What are you talking about? We discussed this. It's all arranged. It's for your own good, my own good," I repeated, allowing a thin, cold smile to touch my lips. "Or yours, Mark? Yours and Chloe's. Let's be honest, shall we, for once?" The color drained from their faces. They exchanged a nervous glance. "I don't understand," Chloe stammered. "You seemed agreeable." "I seemed what you wanted me to seem," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "Confused, compliant, easily led. It made your task so much simpler, didn't it? While you were busy arranging my life, selling my home from under me, and planning my comfortable confinement, I was making a few arrangements of my own. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a surge of power, a delicious sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. You see, you made a critical error. You assumed that because you hid my phone, I was helpless, isolated. You assumed I was incapable of foresight, of protecting myself. Mark scoffed, a pathetic attempt to regain his composure. Protecting yourself? Mom, we're trying to protect you. This is absurd. What arrangements could you possibly have made? I said, savoring the moment. That's where Ms. Evelyn Albright comes into the picture. A rather brilliant solicitor, I believe you'll find. I consulted her several weeks ago, when your concern for my welfare first became so pronounced. The name hung in the air between us, a potent, invisible force. Their expressions shifted from confusion to a dawning, horrified comprehension. The hunter, I thought with grim satisfaction, was about to become the hunted. The stunned silence that followed my mention of Ms. Albright was more eloquent than any words. Mark's face, moments before flushed with smug anticipation, was now a sickly grey. Chloe looked as if she might faint, the carnations slipping from her nerveless fingers and scattering across the polished wood of the table, a splash of incongruous colour in the suddenly stark room. Ms. Albright. Mark finally choked out, his voice barely a whisper. You saw a lawyer. Indeed, I did, Daniel, I replied, my voice calm and steady, relishing the slow, agonizing dawn of understanding on their faces. A very thorough one. She helped me put certain safeguards in place. You see, I anticipated that my loving children might one day develop an overwhelming desire to manage my affairs, perhaps even my very existence, for their own benefit. I paused, letting the words sink in. She helped me draft a new will, for instance. A rather interesting document, I think you'll find. An durable power of attorney, naming her as my agent, with very specific instructions regarding any attempts at undue influence or coercion. Instructions that are, I believe, being triggered as we speak. Chloe made a small, whimpering sound. Mark simply stared, his mouth agape, the carefully constructed edifice of his plans crumbling around him. But, the house. Golden Meadows. He stammered, gesturing vaguely at the useless papers on the table. Irrelevant, I said coolly. Any signatures you might have hoped to obtain from me today, under duress, and without independent legal counsel which, by the way, you conveniently ensured I couldn't access, by misplacing my phone, would be null and void. Ms. Albright has already lodged caveats and notifications with all relevant parties, including my bank, the land registry, and yes, even the charming Golden Meadows facility, informing them that I am not to be considered capable of making major financial or life decisions without her direct, personal involvement and approval. Any attempt to proceed without that approval will be met with swift and decisive legal action. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out the old, pay-as-you-go phone, the one they hadn't known existed. I placed it on the table beside their useless documents. I made one call this morning, just before you arrived. To Ms. Albright. She's expecting an update. Or perhaps, a visit from two rather disappointed individuals who have just discovered their meticulously laid plans have come to nothing. The color had completely drained from Mark's face. He looked physically ill. Chloe was openly weeping now, silent, racking sobs. The sight brought me no joy, only a profound sadness for what they had become, for what they had forced me to do. But there was also a fierce, undeniable triumph. I had outmaneuvered them. I had protected myself. I had reclaimed my power, not through shouting or hysterics, but through quiet foresight and strategic planning. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by Chloe's muffled sobs and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that suddenly seemed to mark not the passage of my remaining time, but the beginning of their long, uncomfortable reckoning. The transformation in Mark and Chloe was instantaneous and absolute. The arrogance, the condescension, the smug self-assurance all evaporated, replaced by a cowering, panicked fear. They looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years, and saw not a frail, easily manipulated old woman, but someone who had comprehensively outwitted them, someone who held all the power they had so desperately sought to usurp. "Mom, please," Mark finally managed, his voice hoarse, pleading. We didn't understand. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake, a mistake." I queried, raising an eyebrow. "Or a calculated risk that didn't pay off, Mark." "There's a difference," Chloe, through her tears, mumbled. We thought. "You thought you could control me," I finished for her, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You thought you could strip me of my home, my autonomy, my dignity, all under the guise of filial concern. You thought that by taking my phone, you had silenced me, isolated me. You were wrong." On all counts, I gestured towards the scattered carnations, their cheerful colors now a mocking reminder of her false sentiment. "These pretty flowers don't cover the ugliness of your intentions, Chloe." The fight had gone out of them completely. They were deflated, defeated. The documents on the table, once symbols of their impending victory, now seemed like indictments, testaments to their greed and deceit. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, the culmination of weeks of tension and emotional strain. But beneath it, there was a bedrock of triumph, a deep, satisfying sense of justice served. I had faced their betrayal head-on, not with weakness, but with a strength they never knew I possessed. "Ms. Albright," I continued, "will be in touch with you both regarding the irregularities in your recent conduct. I suggest you cooperate fully. As for me, I will be changing the locks on my doors this afternoon. Your visits, for the foreseeable future, will be by explicit invitation only. And those invitations will be scarce, if forthcoming at all, until I see genuine, sustained evidence of remorse and a fundamental change in your attitudes." Mark nodded mutely, his eyes downcast. Chloe couldn't even look at me. "And my phone," I added, my gaze lingering on them. "I expect it to be returned to the hall table, where it belongs, by the end of the day. No questions asked about its mysterious disappearance, though we all know the truth, don't we?" The power shift was palpable, an almost physical force in the room. The silence of my lost phone, which they had engineered to be a symbol of my helplessness, had now become a testament to their folly, their utter misjudgment of the woman who had given them life and who they had, in turn, tried to spiritually euthanize. They had hidden my phone, believing it would leave me stranded, unable to call for help. But the most important call had already been made, weeks before, to a lawyer who had armed me not with a weapon, but with an impenetrable shield of legal foresight. The victory was quiet, personal, and utterly complete. The aftermath was as quiet and decisive as the confrontation itself. Mark and Chloe left my house in a state of stunned, humiliated silence, the previously confident set of their shoulders now slumped in defeat. The offending documents remained on my dining room table, a monument to their failed coup, until I later swept them into the bin with a grim satisfaction. True to my word, the locksmith arrived that afternoon, and the reassuring click of new tumblers falling into place felt like the closing of a painful chapter, and the securing of a new, more autonomous one. Later that evening, as dusk settled, I heard a faint sound at the front door. Peeking through the curtains, I saw Chloe's car pull away quickly. On the hall table, where it had always resided, sat my smartphone, its screen dark and silent. I picked it up, a faint, knowing smile on my lips. It felt different in my hand now, no longer just a communication device, but a symbol of a battle fought and won, a testament to my resilience. Ms. Albright did indeed contact Mark and Chloe. I wasn't privy to the details of those conversations, nor did I wish to be. It was enough to know that my interests were being protected, my boundaries enforced. The good behavior incentive in my revised will, which Ms. Albright had no doubt subtly alluded to, would likely serve as a powerful motivator for them to reconsider their approach to filial duty. Life settled into a new rhythm. The oppressive atmosphere of their constant, manipulative presence was gone, replaced by a peaceful solitude that I found I rather cherished. I reconnected with old friends, pursued hobbies I'd let slide, and reveled in the simple freedom of making my own decisions, big and small, without unsolicited advice or a hidden agenda. The phone, now restored to its rightful place, rang far less frequently with calls from my children. When they did call, their tone was markedly different, hesitant, respectful, almost fearful. There were no more casual assumptions, no more patronizing suggestions. They asked, rather than told. They listened, rather than dictated. Whether this change was born of genuine remorse, or simply a pragmatic recognition of their altered circumstances, only time would tell. I held no illusions about a sudden, miraculous transformation in their characters. Trust, once so profoundly broken, would not be easily rebuilt. But I had drawn a line in the sand, a line fortified by legal precedent and my own unwavering resolve. They knew, now, that I was not to be trifled with, not to be underestimated. The fierce, vengeful feelings had largely subsided, replaced by a quiet, empowering sense of self-possession. The triumph wasn't in their defeat, but in my own reclamation of self, my reaffirmation of my own worth and agency. My kids had hidden my phone so I couldn't call anyone, but I had already spoken to a lawyer. And in that one act of foresight, I had not only saved myself from their machinations, but had also, perhaps, given them the hardest, most necessary lesson of their lives, that their mother was not a pawn to be moved, but a queen, capable of defending her own castle. And the roses of that particular victory, though planted in a soil of betrayal, bloomed with a fierce and undeniable beauty.